Reuben, welcome to the Z Marketing Podcast. Thank you for being with us today.
Zeb, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, before we go into it, for my audience who doesn't yet know who you are, give us your elevator pitch, your 30-second commercial.
Well, I'm a former sales and marketing consultant for Fortune 500 companies who was great at helping clients and really crappy at my own sales and marketing. And I ended up building accidentally very much what one of my customers called an anti-CRM. So instead of for a VP of sales to keep track of a sales team, it is for a solo coach, consultant, fractional, etc., to create nurture relationships and follow up and be effective at business development without being salesy.
Yeah, let's get into that. How can someone be better at sales follow-up without coming across as salesy, annoying, desperate? What are your tips or some suggestions for that?
Well, I think we've all had experiences when we're trying to buy something where either we're harassed by some salesperson we don't want to talk to, or we're desperately trying to get someone to call us back so we can give them money in exchange for solving our problem, and they won't do it. And what we want to be doing is talking to the people in that latter category, but actually following up with them. So I like to think of it as if you are in a relationship business, you're in a conversation business, which seems very obvious to me now, but I spent decades trying to avoid that truism because I didn't want to talk to people because it felt icky to me. So
Hmm.
if you're in a conversation business, you've essentially got a two-step sales process. Figure out exactly who you want to talk to and talk to them. And if you do those things, naturally you're going to create a virtuous cycle and you're going to get better at finding who you want to talk to. You're going to get better at talking to them and so on. Usually what happens though is we feel icky about it. We don't do a great job of defining who we want to talk to. So we have a lot of awkward conversations where we're trying to convince people that where we act more like that harassing salesperson, even if we don't want to do that, or we don't want to follow up because we feel awkward. And that creates a vicious cycle. So real simple. If you're in a conversation business, i.e., you're in a relationship business, figure out exactly who you want to talk to and then talk to them.
Solid advice. Now, I think a lot of people have a hurdle with sales. Some people, it comes naturally. We all know those two type of people. But some people feel, like you said, the word icky. They might
Mm-hmm.
feel I'm being intrusive, or they feel like I'm that slick-haired used car salesman.
Mm-hmm.
How can people get over that? Because it sounds like you were able to get over that. How can some of my listeners who are solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, salespeople, marketers, how can they get over their fear of selling?
Well, I think we all can bring up that image of the used car salesman or the Glengarry Glen Ross always be closing kind of person. That's
Great
somebody,
movie.
yeah, it is a great movie, right? But it's like that's who we don't want to be. And I think what's common about all of those icky salespeople is they are doing it for themselves. They are not doing it to help you. And if instead we think about a doctor who is also in many ways a salesperson, but hopefully is there to treat patients, and of course by doing that they make a living, but they're there to treat your patients and make them healthier. They're helping. Most of us think of our doctors very differently than we think of the car salesperson, right? So we can show up as a doctor instead of a salesperson by one, letting everyone know we have a certain specialty, right? So people can refer the folks who need that particular type of shoulder surgery to us instead of us standing outside the hospital saying, hey, you look like your shoulders are a little bit weak. What do you think about coming in for a checkup? Right? Like that's how a lot of solopreneurs act because they can help so many people. They're almost like a doctor on an airplane and they're rushing to treat anybody they can and then wondering why it's not going very well, why people don't want to talk to them. Well, because they're not the right specialist. And they can't even get the right referrals because people don't know who to refer to them. So get really specific about who your ideal client is. And then when you're in the room with that person, we've all had those experiences too, where it doesn't feel like selling at all. The only thing we have to do is be like, hold on a second. I got to ask a few more questions before I go perform surgery on you because we have to know what we're dealing with here. And they're just so eager to get started, right? That comes from specificity. And then once you do that, you start realizing, hey, this conversation business is actually a lot of fun. It's not awkward. It's not icky. It is like the doctor talking to shoulder patients all day when they really love dealing with shoulders or whatever the specialty happens to be. And some fraction of people might need surgery. Some fraction of people need to do some stretches and they're fine. Some fraction of people should come back in 6 months. Some fraction of people should go see a different specialist down the hall. That's all fine. But you're having a great time talking about shoulders. I say that, I use that as an example because I have a titanium screw in my shoulder, but it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter what the particular niche is. Point is, these are your patients, your people. You're not trying to treat everybody just because you have a medical degree and you might know a little bit more about knees and joints and ankles and arthritis and anything else than a layperson. You're there to deal with shoulders. So get real clear about that and then have the conversations. And before you know it, you're going to realize, hey, this is actually a lot of fun. And that's going to be the thing that helps you keep doing it. And then make sure, like a good medical practice again, like sometimes patients aren't the best at scheduling their follow-up appointments because they're busy, they're forgetful as well. Make sure you're the one following up. Don't
Yes.
lose track of the follow-up. That is where the fortune is, according to the axiom, right? And that's true. A lot of people are not ready right now, right today, even if they want to be. They've got other things they have to line up before they engage with your services, but they really want to. And if you call them back, whether it's in a month or 3 months or even a year later, that might be when they're ready. Same thing goes for referral partners. This is perhaps even more important. So many of us rely on referrals, but we're not intentional about cultivating them. We don't go out of our way to actually talk to the people who bring us patients or business or whatever you want to think of it as. Make sure you're having those conversations as well. Try to send people to them if it's appropriate. It's not always a reciprocal referral arrangement, but if it can be, that certainly helps.
Yeah, and thank you for getting into referral partners because that's actually was my next question I was going to go into is that you touched on a few different points. There's the having people come to you, what you might call an inbound lead or a referral. There's the outbound, like, hey, do you need this? I do this. Do you have this pain point? My solution can solve it. But a great way to get more of those, what you might call inbound leads or things where you don't have to be chasing people down or, putting your marketing message in a place where it might not be well received or it might not the intended recipient they're not the person isn't the intended recipient is to build these relationships as you mentioned, cultivate these referral partners. Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, I think especially when you're a solo person and especially when you're not particularly into selling, what do you want to do? You want to get those perfect referrals where somebody says, "Oh, Zeb, I'm so glad so and so. I'm so glad Reuben introduced us. I've been struggling with this for a year. So looking forward to get started, et cetera, et cetera." Right? That's where a lot of us get our clients from. And at the same time, I know for me, I didn't do anything intentional to foster that. I mean, I did good work. That's helpful. That's really important. But I didn't actively nurture those relationships. And that's just such a waste. Again, we are a tribe of people that doesn't like selling. So what should we do? We should empower our referral partners, i.e. our virtual sales team, to sell for us. They can't do everything, but they can do a lot of the nitty gritty sort of prospecting and frontline sales, if you will, that we hate
Hmm.
and get us to the point where there's a patient who might need surgery sitting in a room with us. That's the kind of conversation we tend to like having.
Yeah, and it's interesting, this whole idea of referral partners, it changed my whole view of networking. I didn't even know there was a word for it, but I started to realize I sometimes call it cheerleaders, evangelists. These are people when a lot of people have the mistake, they go to a networking event and they think I'm going to pick up leads there.
Hmm.
Or they post on LinkedIn and they think that someone's going to see the LinkedIn post and become their client. Now that can happen. It's happened to me. It's happened to all of us probably once or twice, every so often. But more often, the people who are cheering you on, leaving comments, liking your posts, or the people who you connect with at a networking event, they're not necessarily going to be your client or customer. But what they can be, if you nurture that relationship and you follow up and you keep in touch and you provide them value and you help them, is they could be your referral people. And another
Hmm.
thing that I'll add to that is when I started out as an entrepreneur, I thought you just do a great job with your clients. Your clients love you, and then they refer people to you.
Hmm.
Not really the case. A lot of clients can love you, give you a testimonial. Occasionally, they'll even mention you, but most of the time, they're busy like everyone else. It's nothing personal. They're running their own business. They have their own lives. They have their own family. They're grateful for the work you've done, but they're not thinking about you. Like they're
Right.
not going to a party and being like, you should work with this guy. Every now and then that happens, but you can't rely solely on that or your business won't grow. Um, Also, of course, depends on the type of industry. You mentioned medical professionals. More likely, you're going to hear, "Oh, you should talk to Doctor So and So. He's great with shoulders," or "You should talk to this lawyer. You know, he helped me get out of that traffic ticket," or whatever. But a lot of businesses that doesn't happen often enough. So you need to cultivate relationships with other people, maybe in other industries or adjacent industries, who keep each other in mind. And how have you done that? Are you part of any kind of communities, or how have you made it so that more people remember you, think of you, and refer you?
Well, I think you asked a number of great questions, and I will try to remember and address them all. And if I forget any, just hit me again. But I
Yeah.
think the first step is, why should somebody refer you, right? We like to think it's to help us, but it's never to help us. It's to help the person making the referral look good to the person they're referring to you. So make sure.
Amazing point. Thank you. I just want to say that's a great point. It's often like the psychology of why someone refers. Like, I think for me, like a lot of people, at least I like to pride myself as being like the I know a guy or gal person. And yeah, continue.
Right. And it's like, I know a guy who's not only like someone that I know, but who will fix your problem. And you're going to like think I'm great for making that connection, right? We're not referring somebody just because we happen to know a plumber or a doctor or whatever, but it's like, this is the plumber that gets stuff done in the right way. And so making that connection gives us some social currency with our colleagues, with our friends, with our family, etc. So that's the first thing to understand. They are not doing it because they are an unpaid sales rep for you. So, so make sure that one, you do a good job. Two, you have a message that's interesting and specific enough that they can recall it, remember it, and repeat it to that person. So let's just say you're a business coach and you did some great work for somebody, but they can't really tell what you did, just that things were better. Like
Hmm.
they might refer you in some cases, but if you can help them understand, hey, here's the framework you were operating in, and here's the framework you're operating in now. And then when they run into someone else at their Chamber of Commerce meeting or whatever, they can be like, hey, Reuben, you're operating in the, the slow zone or whatever the name that they have that helps them sort of recall at the right time and then repeat the story. That's going to really help. So make sure you've got something memorable. I've started asking people, what's your secret? What's the thing that you believe that unlocks tremendous value for your niche that other people probably don't know or think is nuts? Because when I ask people what they do and how they're different, people give such generic answers like, oh, I help people who are stuck who want to grow revenue. And well, how are you different? Well, I put the client's needs first. Like, like this is not helping. It
Right.
may or may not even be true. I don't know because if you didn't put the client's needs first, you'd probably say that you did, right? So
Right.
what's the secret that really unlocks things? That's something that I can remember when I'm talking to people, right? Like I was talking to a guy who does exit planning for business owners, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of snoozing because it's a really hard referral to make because you have to make it like years in advance of the exit
Yeah.
when the person doesn't want to think about exit planning, right? It's a really hard thing that way. But what he told me, the secret is most business owners fail to exit successfully according to themselves. Everyone exits, right? Whether you get carried out in a box or you sell it to somebody, we all exit our business eventually. And his point was even the people who actually get the price they want, which is a very small minority, the majority of them regret it a year later because they didn't set up their life right. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, right? That's something I can talk to a business owner about today because I'm not talking about exit planning or whatever. I'm like, hey, you might want to think about this because I know how much of your self-worth is wrapped up in your business and it's awesome and blah, 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 blah. But here's a guy you might want to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great example. You know, one thing I ask people lately, especially when I'm like you said, snoozing, and thank you for saying that because I think so many people I go to these networking groups, and I think we all listen politely when someone's going on about what their business is, giving their 30-second commercial, their pitch. But a lot of us, especially if it's not an industry we have much experience or context with, are thinking to ourselves, well, they're kind of glazing over. They don't
Yes.
really know what they're doing, and they're going into too much jargon, or it's just like I don't know anyone who needs that. So what I ask people is, all right, make it very simple. Like explain to me like I'm a third grader. And I'll say something like, what are the keywords? What are the phrases that someone I meet might say
Hmm.
that should make me think you should talk to whoever I'm talking to? Like, for example, if someone says, I'm really thinking about maybe one day selling this business. That's a great time to say, hey, I know this guy. Or, basically, if somebody says something that triggers, like, they use a certain, in my business, for example, if someone complains about how sales have been kind of slow, or we're launching a new product, or we're opening a new location or something like that. That's a great opener that you could say, "Hey, I know this guy Zev. He's a great marketer. He does ads, whatever. You should talk to him." So I always like to ask people not just who you want to meet, but what are the kind of phrases or words, terminology that when I hear someone say it, that's what my cue to refer you.
I
Um,
think that's a great, great point. And I just want to underscore for everyone listening, make sure you have a good answer to that question because I ask that too. And sometimes I get great answers and sometimes I get really crappy answers like, well, business owners who feel stuck, business owners who are stressed out, people who would like to do better with their health. I'm like, that's like 5 billion people.
Exactly. Yeah. So I even tell people kind of like the way that in marketing do a buyer persona. Like, don't just say I want to serve entrepreneurs in the tech space. Like, give the guy a name, an
Hmm.
age, an income level, some issues he may be having at work or at home, or things about things he's self-conscious about, things he prides himself on. Give it like make a person. And so same here, like the more specific, the better. Like, what is the thing they're yelling at to in the morning, or something that might be like they need your service right now, like
Hmm.
something like that, like the specific words that they would use. So your solution, which I want to talk about, it's a CRM. Now, well, it's an anti-CRM CRM, as you describe it.
Right.
I want to get into a little more about the anti, because I think a lot of my audience is familiar with CRMs. We get pitched them on a daily basis. There are many different ones. Some are more for enterprise level, some are more for small businesses or entrepreneurs. I would love to know what, as you said, you ask people what differentiates them. What differentiates your solution from other client relationship management systems?
Sure. Well, typically CRMs, and I've tried dozens of them myself, are for a VP of sales to keep track of the sales team. Like that's why we have this whole category of software. So when us solo folks start out, we typically have a spreadsheet or a notebook or a stack of business cards or whatever it might be. And then at some point we go, oh, this isn't working. I need a CRM. And then we go with some of the big names that we've heard of and we're really excited for a few months and then we're like oh my gosh, like I didn't want to walk home from the grocery store carrying my groceries, but now I'm taking the space shuttle to the grocery store and this is even worse. And then we go back to our spreadsheet and then we go, oh, this isn't working, and we were like, okay, let me try something a little simpler. Okay, great, now I'm taking a jetliner to the grocery store. It's better than the space shuttle, but it's still terrible. And what I realized, and I should have realized a lot sooner, but it took me a long time to recognize, was I'm trying to use a tool for a different purpose, right? Like I want to track my business development efforts. That's the same thing as a traditional CRM, except I want to do it by actually understanding my relationships, not by tracking my sales team because I don't have a sales team. Or I should say, I have a virtual sales team, my partners, who the CRM does not do a great job of helping me nurture relationships with, but that's essential for me. I want to get really good at figuring out who I want to talk to. So I want my CRM to actually help me with that messaging. And I want it to help me follow up and never let anything fall through the cracks. And one of the things that drove me nuts with the traditional tools I tried, they're pretty good because you're trying to force leads from marketing through a funnel. It's all very transactional. But if you forget to say, hey, the next time I need to talk to this person is whatever, which of course you should be doing, and I was generally doing, but every once in a while I'd forget or I'd get logged out before I could enter that in. And then that person was like gone in a puff of smoke. And then I'd run into them at a conference a year later. Oh, what did you end up doing? Crap, I'm sorry, I forgot to follow up. Right. That's when somebody wants you to follow up and give money to you. We should be doing that. You know, like you said, they're busy people. They don't always have the means to reach out and tell us, hey, what's going on. But if we reach out to them, we can do that. So I wanted a really simple way to kind of flip through patients in a waiting room and have the right diagnostic conversation with them instead of feeling like I'm in a sales call and I have to move this person from point A to point B in my pipeline report, or, you know, my VP of sales is going to get mad at me. And there's a bunch of other stuff in there that's helpful as well, referral tracking and tracking who other people want to meet so I can make introductions for people. Um, Lead magnets, proposals, e-signature, things like that. But the heart of it is, let's figure out exactly who we want to talk to, and then let's actually have conversations with them and make it fun.
Yeah, and I think being in a relationship business and relationship driven selling, you use the right word. It can be fun. You know, if you know how to do it right and you have the right expectations, you're not looking every time you meet someone, you're not always thinking transactionally or short term. You're not thinking, well, introduce me to five clients. No, introduce me to five new friends that could be referral partners. Because like they say, your network is your net worth. And that cliche is very true. I think CRMs, which is a tech component, but I think that a CRM bridges that gap between marketing and sales.
Hmm.
You know, historically, there's been a rivalry sometimes between marketing and sales. They don't always get along, and they really should. And I think today they're almost blended, increasingly. Um, how does your solution, I guess, uh, bridge that gap? And also, um, you know, let's start with that because then I want to ask you one other question about the relationship nurturing piece and the referral partner component. But please go into a little bit basically how your tool works, how it bridges that gap from awareness to prospect to lead to customer to loyalty and follow up.
Sure. So, especially when you're solo, there better be no real conflict between sales and marketing. Now, I've managed to create it at times, but in theory, they should really be very well aligned when your
Right, in
business is
bigger
just you.
organizations,
Right.
I think it's usually that way. Right. Correct.
So, you know, I like to think of it as there's people that we're talking to, they're coming into our world. Maybe we meet them through networking. They come in, they grab a lead magnet from our website or they're a referral. And I want to be able to kind of see who's coming into my world, make sure I'm talking to them, make sure I'm following up with them, and deciding like there are some people that you don't want to talk to again. That's totally fine. But make that decision intentionally instead of you just being overwhelmed and forgetting. The folks that you really want to keep talking to, make sure you do that. So I'm a big believer of putting things on my calendar if I want to get them done. So makes it really easy to say, I want to block off, for example, time Thursday afternoon to talk to my prospects. And so, you know, does that mean that it's going to happen 100% of the time? Of course not. But it's going to happen by default instead of requiring a miracle to happen. And I think too often we try to squeeze this stuff in later after we've put all the big rocks in and then it doesn't work and we go, oops, I didn't follow up with people and now I'm in feast or famine mode. So it makes it really easy to do just a little bit of nurturing of those conversations, or of those relationships via conversations, even if you're busy, even if you're wall to wall with client work, even if you've got a bunch of other stuff going on, family or whatever, like just keeping that relationship, that garden watered, if you will, even if you're not tending it as well as you would if that was your full-time focus, it means it doesn't wither and die. That's what happens with relationships that we don't tend, they wither and die. And then you go, oh crap, my big project just ended and my garden's dead.
Hmm.
Now I'm in freak out mode and I don't like it again. So instead, you just kind of keep things going little by little and you have a good time doing it. Encourages you to do it. You feel good. You don't think, "Oh gosh, this is terrible. I have to force myself to do it." Instead, you look forward to it. So it creates a virtuous cycle, it creates a habit. And before you know it, you're having a lot more conversations and a lot more success without ever feeling like you're selling to anybody.
Exactly. It becomes more like, the sales are coming to you. You don't have to do, when you get a referral from a trusted third party, uh, somebody that someone knows, likes, and trusts, and they trust their opinion, and they refer you, you've already made like 90% of the sale right there.
Hmm.
And that was because you fostered and cultivated that relationship. You obviously provided that person some value. They thought of you. And now you just have to help the person choose, like, speak to the rational side. Like, a lot of the emotional part is done, not all of it, but a lot of it. And then you just have to fit them into the right solution, the right uh, package if you have. And then I think to also really cultivate, grow your trust is if you don't have what they're looking for, then, pay it forward, refer to somebody else in
That's
your
right.
network. And that helps them too. And they'll remember you for when they might need what you have. These are all really important and stellar points. Where can people, oh, the last thing I want to ask you, a lot of CRMs, like if people use Salesforce, HubSpot, these big ones, there's a lot there for keeping track of prospects,
Hmm.
leads, and maybe, existing customers, remembering their birthday, following up with them when it's time to renew. And it's extremely sales driven, which is very understandable for bigger companies. But when you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur, freelancer, and you don't want to be feast or famine, you want steady revenue, you want always, you don't want it to run dry. You want people to always be flooding you with, hey, I got your name from so and so. Hey, do you do this, right? Um, you really thrive on those relationships and those follow-ups. Can you go into a little more detail about how your CRM, you mentioned it can help you stay in touch, not just with your customers or prospects, but with those referral partners, even helping you remember to think of them because that also engenders, reciprocity, etc. How can your CRM be extremely valuable to the solopreneur who's trying to keep track with all these people they meet in one-on-ones and things like that?
Yeah, great question. And that's a lot of what it's designed to do because I was getting overwhelmed and I was talking to other people who felt the same way. It's like you go to these all these networking things and if you can't follow up effectively, then it doesn't do you any good. You're checking a box, but you're not actually seeing results. So, as we already talked about, like making sure you've got really clear positioning is super helpful for making you more referable. But then when I meet people through networking, when I tag them as a networking contact, my CRM will automatically generate a couple of tasks to schedule a one-to-one meeting, to connect on LinkedIn, and to make an introduction. Now, do I do that for every single person I meet? No. Every once in a while, I'm like, I don't like this person. I don't like the business they're in. I'm gonna not do any of these things for them, right? That happens, right?
Yeah.
It's not a dictate. It's a guidepost to help us stay on top of things, and that's how you and I connected, right? And like, okay, we better connect on LinkedIn. Let's have a one-to-one conversation. Let's make an introduction. And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to make another introduction, but I want to really force myself to have a queue of people to think, have I introduced anyone to this person? Can I make a connection to make this person's world better? Like that's just, it's some of the lowest
Yeah.
hanging fruit if we can do it in an organized manner. And that's where in the system it will track for every single person, not only who referred them, but who's their ideal client profile, what's their ideal partner profile, and what's their secret. So I can search all those things and try to put people together, which is how I was able to make an introduction for you a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
Like, because I knew that there was somebody there, but even right now, I could not tell you the name of that person. I can see their face, I know their industry, I know a lot about what they do, but I'm just like, my brain can't keep track of all this stuff. But
No,
a
we
computer
can't,
is great
especially.
at that, right? So I
Right,
can
right.
go
For
in and
always
search.
networking. Yes, we need the computer, we need the AI, whatever it is. And just a couple quick examples for the audience. We've all had these situations. We met somebody and they had a great conversation, but then like, what was her name again? Where can I? Or I was talking to so and so. When they were talking, they mentioned what they were doing, and it wasn't super relevant to me. I was like, well, I'll keep my eyes open, kind of thing. But then 3 months later, someone really needs that. Oh,
Right.
who was that? Or let's say you have your big, like I'd call a whale, like your juicy ideal client prospect. You really want their business. And they're maybe they have a proposal on the table. And then you see on LinkedIn or in a group chat, this person's looking for help with something.
Hmm.
And you talk to somebody who can do that thing, and then by making that intro, you will help them so much. They'll be much more inclined to probably want to work with you, but you can't remember that person and that contact info. So like this is a truly sounds like a truly valuable tool. Where can people connect with you and learn more about it?
Sure. If you go to Mimiran.com, that's Mimiran.com, and I'm sure there'll be a link in the show notes somewhere. You
Absolutely.
can start a free trial and see a bunch of videos and screenshots and things like that. You can also get a bunch of free resources, proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, free trainings, Sales for Nerds podcast, all kinds of stuff for that independent consultant, coach, or fractional who loves serving clients but maybe needs a little help with the sales and marketing side of their business.
For sure. We'll link all that in the show notes. And I love that it also has a lead magnet component. That's a really useful, helpful thing. Ruben, thank you so much for coming on the Z Marketing Podcast. I really appreciate this conversation. And I know that you gave a lot of value to my listeners and viewers as well. And I hope to have you back on sometime soon.
Sounds great, Zeb. I am here to help people avoid the struggles that I went through. If people can learn the easy way instead of the way I learned, then I've done my job.
Thank you.